This is Gemara Metziah Daf Mem, and we're holding on Mem Amud Aleph, and we ran a little bit too fast. I hope it wasn't that fast, as it was a conversation, Rav Chisda, Rav Ami, on the top of Mem Amud Aleph, and therefore we went all the way to the Mishnah in the previous year. And we pick it up from the Mishnah, Mem Amud Aleph, a new sugya. The sugya that we need to just have one dot in mind is that, of course, when we deal with a world of, we'll call it markets, sales, produce, and farmers, the value of an item could increase, decrease over time, and therefore, we'll see how that plays out. So let's begin the Mishnah, Mem Amud Aleph. Hamafkid peiros etzel chaveroi. Someone deposits peiros, fruit, etzel chaveroi, by his friend. Hareze yoitzi loi, excuse me. Hareze yoitzi loi chesroinais. He could deduct the chesroinais, the depletion expected before return it. So this is what we're referring to, that there's items that change in value. Just look at Rashi to start the stage. Says Rashi, Hareze yoitzi loi chesroinais. Kishayachzerim loi. When you return the fruit to the owner, Yibchais, you could detract Kamim Regilin Lachsar, the amount that is normal to subtract. And Rashi sort of anticipates a difficulty and therefore tells us what's going on over here is Vigmar Mukila, B'She'irvan Impe Raisav. You mix them with your own fruit, so we can start to conjure up and realize why we now need to worry about depreciation. Because if you give me a basket full of fruit and it's sat in the corner, now I give it back to you, why do I care what the normal value to depreciate, etc. is? Again, the Gemara will elaborate upon that. Says the Mishnah, continuing with other types of items and their expected depreciation. Lechitim ula oires, for wheat, ula oires, for rice, for millet. Tisha chatzi kabin lekor, you subtract 9 half kabin per kor. Lisoirin ula daichen, for barley and for daichen. Tisha kabin lekor. Lekusmin, which is spelt, ula zarapishtan, flaxseed, sholish sa in lekor. Ha'akol lefi amida v'akol lefi azman. And again, the klal is more important to us because we're not necessarily farmers and we don't necessarily understand what does it mean, 9 chatzi kav per this and per that. But what we could understand is akol lefi amida, akol lefi azman, that you have to take into consideration the norm of depreciation that an item goes through. Continues the Mishnah, second opinion. Why do the mice care how much of this produce you have? But the mice eat the produce. Whether you have a lot or whether you have a little bit. Ella therefore says Rav Yechon ben Nuri, we do not deduct the depreciations. Ella L'kor echad bilvad, for one kor, because that is the normal amount that the mice eat. More than that is irrelevant, says Rav Yechon ben Nuri. You might have a lot of produce, but you only subtract per one kor. Rav Yehuda Imer, a third opinion. Emaisa mida meruba, einai maitzalei chesroinais. If it is a large midah, then you do not subtract the deductions, depreciations, because there's also the inflation. There's also the amount that the fruit increases over time. Says Rav Yehuda that offsets off the loss. And we'll see this has to do with the fact that different seasons, fruits expand, etc., etc., etc. Says the Gemara, Oirez tuva chasar. Says the Gemara, Oirez in reality subtracts a lot more than the Mishnah said. Amar Rabbi Chanan Rav Yechon ba'Oirez kol of shana. We're talking about peeled Oirez. Lekos bin lazara pishtan gimel son the core. Amar Rav Yechon Rav Chia zara pishtan. When we talk about these flaxseeds, bigvulin shanu, we're talking about in its husks. Tanam yachi lekos bin lazara pishtan bigvulin. Lazer Oirez she'inai kol of shlishasayin the core. Again, different amounts for different items, different produce. And we continue the two dots, Hakol Lefi Amida. As we mentioned, this is the klal. Says the Gemara Tana, Kain, Lachol, Kor, Lekor, Lechein, Lechol Shana, Leshana. Says the Braisa, you deduct the same amount for each and every kor, for each and every year. Hakol Lefi Amida, Hakol Lefi Azman. Now we continue with opinion number 2 in the Mishnah, which was Rav Yechon Menuri, 10 lines from the white lines, in which Rav Yechon Menuri taught us that mice don't care how much produce you have, you only subtract per 1 kor. Says the Gemara Tani, we learned in Abraisa, Amrullah, Rav Yochanan, Harbe Oivdois Mehen. They said to Rav Yochanan, Harbe, much oivdois is lost, man. Meaning, it spoils. Rav Yechon ben Nuri, you're saying the mice don't care. Rav Yechon ben Nuri, what about the fact that stam over time the fruit spoils? Furthermore, say the Chachamim, harbe mispazrois mehem. What about the fact that it gets scattered by the wind, by the rains, and therefore says the Chachamim, that's why we have to take more into consideration than 1 kur. Continues the Gemara. Tana, we learned in a Braisa. And now this Braisa is going to bring up the detail that Rashi taught us. The din of the Mishnah that you deduct is only if you mix it with your produce. But if you put the produce in a corner, then, as we explained, take it back. It's sitting there. Whatever is there is yours. And we don't have to deduct anything. Says the Gemara, 1 second. What's the difference? Let him see how much of his own did he have, and thereby take that away, and then give back this guy's. What's the difference? Says the Gemara, we're talking about in a case where he used them, therefore it's impossible to know how much was his, how much was the other guy. So says the Gemara, wait. Let's see, kama is topic. Says the Gemara, Yada, he does not know how much he's topic. Therefore, there's no way to calculate each person's portion, and the only way to do it is to deduct the normal amount from that which the Shemer received originally. We continue with the third opinion of the Mishnah, which was Rav Yehuda. 2 lines on the wide lines teaches Rav Yehuda Imaisa. Rav Yehuda taught us in the Mishnah. You also, says Rav Yehuda, if it was a Mida Meruba, then you don't subtract. Says the Gemara, firstly, Kama Mida Meruba. How much is that? Mida Meruba, large. How much is large? Amar Rabbi Rav Chana, Amar Rav Yechon Asara Kurin. 10 kur. Tanami Hachi, we learned in a Braisa, Mida Meruba is what? Asara Kurin, says the Gemara, corroborating the opinion of Rav Yehuda. 10 kur. Continues the Gemara. Tanaka made Rav Nachman on the second white line. When you measured from his own granary, and you returned to him from the same amount. So our weights are equivalent. Aval, however, says the Gemara, if you returned, if the Shemer returns from his house, then then he does not subtract anything. Why? Because it produces. Says the Gemara, a different nuance. When you measure from your house, use a different measuring metric. And therefore, what happens is that which is lost is gained back based on the larger measurement that you're going to use when it comes from the house. Therefore, you don't deduct anything. Amar Lei says Rav Nachman, this sounds absolutely ridiculous. We're talking about a ridiculous person. I give to you with a large measurement. I take back with a small measurement. Why would anyone agree to that? The owner gives 5 pounds and he takes back measured on, I don't know, pounds, but on liters. And all of a sudden he loses produce, but it equals it out. Says Rav Nachman, that's absolutely ludicrous. So says the Gemara, no, you know what it means? Moisiria is something most like Gairen Kahamrit. Talking about the season of the granary, not the measurements, but rather the seasons, and explains the Gemara. If you do Shomer took the Bikadin and you returned it in the same season, then yes, then you have to subtract. Aval, and here's the Chiddush of Rav Yehuda. And this is when we say, Mimnei, Shemoy Sirios. This is when we say that they equal each other out. You returned it during a different season. Then, because in the rainy season, things expand, and therefore it takes into consideration that which is lost. Says Rabba, wait, if it expands, guess what? Lipakakada, the barrel should break. It says the Gemara, guess what? Number one, Haviuda Potikada, yeah, the barrel broke. Because of the pressure, therefore the barrel doesn't break. But the Gemara says that is Rav Yehuda's opinion. That's when it equals each other out, is when you return it in a different season. We continue with the Mishnah on the bottom of Mem Amud Aleph. With regard to wine, we subtract ashtosa 6. Rav Yehuda Imer Chaimish a 5th. Lugin shem, and 3 lug of oil lemeya per 100 lug. Per 100. Lugu mechsa shmarim, a lug and a half of sediment. Lugu mechsa bala. 1.5 gets absorbed into the container. That's the 3 lug of oil per 100. But if it's refined and pure oil in the shamarim, then you do not subtract to the shamarim because there is no sediment. And if they're older jugs, we don't subtract for absorption because they're already fully saturated and they cannot absorb anymore. Rav Yehuda, even if you sell pure oil to your friend, you also accept a lug and a half of sediment per 100 for a similar detail. That is the normal amount of sediment that is put inside 100 lugs. Says the Gemara, we had a machlekes in the first part of the Mishnah, whether it's a shtos liyayin or whether it's a chaimish liyayin. Says the Gemara of Lei Pligi, guess what? There's really no machlekes in Rav Yehuda Tanakama. How is that true? Explains the Gemara, because Marki Asrei, Basrei Demar. In the place of the Tanakama, Chafu Bikira, they coated the barrels with wax, therefore it didn't absorb so much. You only have to subtract the 6 for absorption. They line it with pitch, and therefore it absorbs more. Second teretz, Misham Gargishta. That the difference is different types of clay. This type of clay by Rav Yehuda absorbs a lot, but there's really no machloikas at all. Says Gemara, story about Rav Yehuda Ramu. They poured 48 kuz into a barrel. Azal dana b'shita zuzah, and they sold a barrel for 6 zuz. So 48 kuz of wine are in a barrel, and a barrel with 6 zuz. Paras Rav Yehuda bought these barrels, 6 zuz apiece, and then shita bezuzah, and then he sold it for 6 zuz, per 6 kuz per zuz. So says the Gemara, let's figure out as we turn over to Mem Amid Beis, let's figure out what were the profits of Rav Yehuda after buying the barrels at obviously a cheaper price and then selling them per kuz. Dal tiltin vishita bishita. Says the Gemara, firstly subtract 36 from 48. Why? Because that's what would be for 6 kuz. Partially tresar. We're left with 12. Dal tamne. And that would be the profit. But dal tamne shetuti. But says the Gemara, subtract 8, which is a 6, like Rav Yehuda taught in the Mishnah. Bashilu arba, and that's how much he made. Says more 1 second. V'amar Shmuel, but Shmuel taught us you're not allowed to gain more than a 6, but a 6 is allowed. So why did Rav Yehuda only gain a 12? Says the Gemara, you could go for Shmara. There's the barrel, there's the sediment that he kept. So Rav Yehuda did gain a little bit more. That wasn't part of the calculation. Says the Gemara. Wait, then he made more than a 6. Says Gemara, no, he could there's the labor that he had to do to tap the barrel properly. Therefore, Rav Yehuda made the appropriate amount. We continue quoting the Mishnah 6 lines down, Memon Beis, moving over to oil. That if Ushamin Mizukak said the Mishnah, Shemarim, then we do not subtract the amount for the Shemarim. Says the Gemara, 1 second. But what about the amount that's absorbed? We're talking about barrels that are lined with pitch. But again, we're talking about a jug that once it's used, it's saturated, it doesn't absorb any further. We continue quoting the Mishnah, 10 lines down. It says Rav Yehuda, you always accept at what? You accept a look and a half per 100. Amar Rabbi says, Abaye kishetim salo oimar ledivrei Rav Yehuda motel ariv shmarim. When we said that according to Rav Yehuda, you're allowed to add in sediment back into the barrel, ledivrei chachamim asur lariv shemen. Explains the Gemara. Ledivrei Rav Yehuda motel ariv shmarim hainu taimud demekabel. That's why the buyer accepts upon himself an extra 1.5. Why? Because it's normal to have the shmarim. If I wanted to mix up the barrel, thereby allowing the sediment to come up, I would have been able to. So hashanami kabel. So right now, even though the oil is pure, let me pour in the sediment. It says more way, let the buyer say, if you would have mixed it in, then I would have been able to sell it, meaning it's all mixed together. What should I do with sediment? That's all by itself. I can't sell it on its own. Explains the Gemara, you're right. Who would prefer the pure oil as he doesn't really plan to resell it. And that's the reason why you're allowed to mix in sediment that's what you're allowed to give him the sediment when you sell it to him. Says the Gemara, 1 second, let the buyer say, since you didn't mix it in, it's called you're being Michael. Says the Gemara, did not. If someone sells the yoke, he does not sell the ox. Look at the value. You do, everyone knows that a yoke does not cause Masayim Zos, so therefore you get them both together. The money is not a raya, but according to Rav Yehuda, we see that there is this implied mechila. Says the Gemara, l'divrei chachamim, asur l'arvev shemarim. You're not allowed to mix this sediment. And that's the reason why the buyer does not have to accept it. Amar lei, the buyer can say, if you would have wanted to mix it in, you would not have been able to, so if I don't have to accept the sediment by itself, hashanami loi mekabel. No, so that's the machlekes of Yehuda and Chachamim, whether you let him mix in the sediment or not. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Amar lei Rabba Abaye. 15 lines from the white lines on Mem Amid Beis. Adrabah. According to the Chachamim, mutar l'arviv shemarim. V'hainu tayima, that's the reason. D'lo mekabel. D'amar lehem, d'lo arvis li, achul achilis li. Says the Gemara, wait! Since you couldn't mix it and you didn't, that means you're a Michael. Whereas the Divrei Rav Yehuda, Asr Larviv Shmar, Vanatam the Mekabel, Damarli, Bar Larvi, Lo Sharili, Larvu Lecha, Kabuli, Lo Mekabelis. So says the Gemara, Zvain Visavrin, Tagra Ikri, go buy and sell and be called a merchant, you cannot let it do that. So says the Gemara, Rav Papa disagrees, and Rav Papa learns the Machlekes Abaye and Abaye, the Machlekes, the Chacham and Rav Yehuda in the reverse. Tana, we quote a Braisa. Says the Braisa, first cousin to our discussion right now, whether one is a purchaser or whether one is a depositor with regard to the pekatim, which is the scum on the bottom of the barrel, as the Gemara now says, my pekatim. What exactly does that mean? Elim, if it means just like when you buy something, you don't want the scum on the bottom. So too the mafkid as well. So too the mafkid as well. But says the Gemara, how could that be? The Shimer could say, what should I do with your scum? What is the scum? The scum is from the oil you gave me, so take it back with oil. Meaning, if you're going to tell me that when the Shimer returns to the mafkid, he's not going to give him back the scum, why not? This garbage on the bottom, says the Shimer, what? You gave it to me, so I'm returning it to you. I'm just a Shimer. Ella says the Gemara, the opposite. Just like when the Shemer returns and he returns back the scum of the bottom, Lekech Nami is Makabel Bekatim. Says what really you mean Makabel Lekech Bekatim? Vatani Rav Yehuda Imer Lam Rusham and Akur Ella Meicher Belvach or Lekech Makabel of Lovu Mechsa Shmarim. That's only when it comes to oil. That's when we say you have to accept the Shem and Akur, this dirty oil. Shmarim B'lei Bekatim. Excuse me. But lugum achsle shmarim, b'loy pekatim. Says Marloi, Kash on the first white line. Hav diavle zuzi b'tishrei v'koshakal Nisan. Kimida de tishrei avle zuzi Nisan v'koshakal Nisan. Kimida de Nisan. Says the Gemara, it depends on the time of year that this deal went down. When someone bought oil in Tishrei, which is right after the olives are harvested, therefore they're still cloudy. But he only took the oil much later, 6 months later in Nisan, with the midah back of Tishrei. So usually in Tishrei there is some of that cloudiness, some of that scum in the bottom of the oil. That's where Yehuda says Lokech has to accept it. Whereas the second price is talking about the opposite, where you paid in Nisan, where the oil is pure, and then you took it in Nisan. So therefore you take meat of Nisan, you're not allowed to put in the scum. We'll pick it up from the Mishnah the next year of Siyata Dishmaya.